Hi, I'm Anna of All Trades, and with the changing seasons, there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done around the homestead, both in the garden, with the animals, and of course our farm equipment. I'm going to run you through what we do to prepare this place for the winter. Before we get started, I would love to give a huge shout out to Stable Products for sponsoring this video. Let's get started.
I get my hands dirty, they show me no mercy, so I just keep working.
In August, we plant our winter garden so it gets established to the point that when the sunshine kind of disappears, it's all grown up and it's then going to grow very, very slowly through the winter. Things in the brassica family like cabbages and kales do really fantastic. A lot of colder weather vegetables like arugula will be fine until it really frosts. We'll keep our chard hanging on as long as we possibly can, and generally it does pretty well. Some of the hardier winter varieties of kale, like this Russian winter kale, do a really great job. We've also got celery and all kinds of other things, but here, like I said, this is our winter garden. But there's a little bit that we need to do to prepare the beds that aren't going to be planted all winter long, so that they don't get overrun by weeds, so they don't have nutrition runoff during the rainy season, and on and on and on. I planted a lot of those squashes and things as weed cover to keep us from having an insane amount of weeds. And so now as I'm, getting rid of their dead plant foliage, I can also harvest those squashes. I'm going to leave it there where it's not going to affect any other plants, and then I'll let it break down for a while and eventually put it into the chicken coop so they can continue to break it down. I've been working on reclaiming the soil from weeds and other overgrowth and reconditioning the soil in the garden by section. So this was pretty much the last section that I had no control of until this year. So I put in a few beds of squashes that were going to shade things out and keep weeds from getting too out of control. But then now, as I've readied them for the winter, I've covered them with green manure, aka greenery that has been waste from some of my other plants. And this stuff will break down over the winter, and what has fully broken down will have added its own nutrients back into the soil beneath it, and what is still here can be moved out of the way, seeds can be planted, and then we've got nice fresh soil that hasn't been fully overtaken by weeds. But this is a great way to avoid having to use plastic and to continue to add nutrients to the soil over the winter. So yes, we are entering winter season and the garden has definitely slowed to an absolute crawl. But as you can see around me, we still have a ton of stuff that we're going to be able to harvest and use over the winter. That is one of the benefits of living in the Pacific Northwest, where we have a very temperate climate. But it's also, you can still grow kales and cabbages and other things over winter, even in pretty cold climates. It's just that they may not keep quite as long throughout the winter. I do a whole lot of propagation in my garden because it's a great way for me to be able to expand my growing operation in an economically friendly way. And one really important part of that is that I like to mark my plants in the fall that I want to make sure that I propagate come spring. So I have a couple of white raspberry canes or golden raspberry canes that are everbearing that did a fantastic job fruiting this year. So while they still have their yellow fruit because they're mixed in with all of my other red raspberries, I want to make sure that I mark those canes so that I can make sure to get all of the offshoots come spring. Also, if I want to move any of those plants during the winter while the plant is dormant, I can know exactly which one I want to move and where. So I just use a little caution tape and I tie it around the cane or fig branch or whatever in question, and then I can come back later and find the one I'm looking for. So the very last step in preparing our homestead for the winter months is to protect our perennials from the frosts and other cold weathers. And so what can be done here is you can use spent alfalfa and sawdust, and we just basically cover everything up. You can see I've already done it in my dahlia bed, and that's basically going to keep them protected from the cold. We may lose a few things to rot because, again, it is very wet here, but it tends to do a very good job of making sure that our perennials are well protected and that they grow again next spring. My morning milking chores are one of my absolute favorite things about living on a homestead. It provides routine that I really appreciate, and it also gives me a chance to spend time with the animals that I, get sustenance from. And it's a great way to keep an eye on their health. It's a great way to make sure that they get all of the vitamins and minerals that they need. And then, of course, I get to have yogurt and cheese and fresh milk on all of my stuff. The one thing about having a milking animal, though, is that eventually their milk dries up, whether it be naturally or otherwise. I like to intentionally dry my animals off to give them a rest before I breed them again. And again, because, oops, I missed there, because I've got animals that I do breed for the purpose of having milk, I also have to be responsible in coming up with good homes for those babies. If you'd like to know more about goat husbandry, go ahead and check out my other videos on goats as well. As we do get to the end of the season, though, while we normally get about a gallon of milk a day, I'm down to a few cups at a time, and I want to slowly dry them off so that they don't get engorged and get mastitis, but I also don't want to milk them often enough that they continue producing milk. So it's a pretty delicate balance of, I do a few weeks where I'm milking once a day, and then I move to every other day, and then eventually I just keep checking to make sure that they're not over full and I only milk them as needed. And so it is a little nostalgic because we're getting to the end of this season, but equally exciting because we'll have one of our other goats bred to have babies in the spring, which is always very exciting. Anyone who has any kind of small equipment on their property, be it a lawnmower, a weed eater, a chainsaw, or anything else, has probably experienced the frustration come springtime of trying to start it and it simply doesn't work. Stable has 3 fantastic products that will help you to store your equipment and also make it easier to maintain come springtime. The first of those things is Stable Storage, which is a fuel stabilizer. The second one of those is Stable Fogging Oil, which stops corrosion in stored engines. And the third one is Stable Rust Stopper, which is going to stop corrosion on, you'll spray it on the bottom of your deck or on your chainsaw chain to stop corrosion over the winter as well. The Stable Fuel Stabilizer needs to be measured and then added directly into your gas can and then poured into the gas tank for overwinter storage. Fuel can break down in 30 to 60 days because of gum, varnish, and corrosion in the fuel system, and Stable Storage prevents that. Without a fuel stabilizer like Stable Storage, you'll see issues when bringing equipment out of storage, including starting problems, poor performance, and reduced engine life. Stable Storage will keep fuel fresh for up to 24 months. It is America's #1 fuel stabilizer, and it has a 60-year legacy in the performance chemical space. Stable products can be purchased at goldeagle.com. Now it's ready for winter. Quick note for small engines that have specific gas mixes, this is also a great product to use with them as well. And because we are done with all of our firewood cutting for the year and barring any big storms, we're not going to need this for a few months. We want to protect all of the metal bits that are exposed, and the spray makes it very easy to do so. Again, you can put this on the bottom deck of your lawnmower or basically any exposed metal parts that you're worried rust might become an issue on. Here on the homestead, we use wood heat to heat our house, and so a lot of our spring and summer activities are involving chopping our wood and making sure that it's stacked and has plenty of time to dry before the winter. So the last step is basically to tarp it up and make sure that it's protected from the fall rains and the winter rains, and then we can untarp each section as we bring loads up with the tractor closer to the house to actually burn and heat our house. This spring I planted all of these new trees, and because of that, knowing that this is a south-facing hill, I planted a bunch of squash and other spreading plants so that they could shade the root systems and I wouldn't have to worry about the root systems of these trees getting dried out. The result of that is a small smattering of a lot of different kinds of squashes and pumpkins. And then of course you see the foliage from them behind me. So another thing that we do as we're cleaning up the farm for the winter is we get rid of all of the extra greenery that was, formerly luscious in here, and we put it into piles and compost it. We then put it into rotation in the chicken coop and let them continue to stir and compost it further. And we also use it as green manure on top of some of our other garden beds. Because though, squash and pumpkin plants tend to get really moldy and they have mildew and other things that can spread to other plants, I want to wait until this is really, really well composted before I use it as that green manure. So once we do have these all picked and harvested, we can actually take them in, and as long as we keep them in dry, cool conditions, they will actually keep a lot of them through the winter, and we can actually still be eating fresh garden produce into January, even February. And by that time, it's time to plant the new spring garden and we're back into freshness once again. So there you have it. I obviously have a little bit of garden cleanup and mulching still ahead of me, but I wanted to give a little picture of what we do at the end of the season to prepare our homestead for winter, in the garden, with the animals, and of course our small machinery as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and for supporting my channel in that way. If you have any video suggestions or homesteading tips you would like to see me make videos about, please leave them in the comments below. Cheers.